The Art Ensemble of Chicago are an American avant-garde jazz group who seem to skirt the line between serious and silly. They were born out of born out of the Association for the Advancement of Creative Musicians, who are an avant-garde collective of musicians, particularly with a leaning towards jazz, but not just. And as well as normal instruments, they also play a variety of world and ethnic instruments and toy instruments. So, nice stat. While playing in Europe in 1969, 500 instruments were used. They've got some members, they've had some past members, they've still got two members, and they've had a lot of guests appear on their albums and presumably on their tours as well. And they're known for playing with face paint on. So they had, in the listing of albums in Wikipedia, there are 5 albums that are in this list before they'd settled on this name, and they had several different names for largely the same people that became the Art Ensemble of Chicago. They then have released quite prolifically at times. So, for example, they released 7 albums in 1969 alone. They're still releasing. They have released an album this year, which is 2023. Hi, my name's Dan. So this is one of the 7 albums that they recorded in 1969. Sorry, released in 1969. It's my first listen to this album, but it's not my first encounter with them. I've reviewed one of their albums before, at least one. It's not easy to get hold of, so I ended up listening to a copy that had been taken from vinyl recording, but I have since found copies of both of these tracks on Spotify, which is what I'll be linking down below. On Spotify, they seem to be listed as part of an album called, just double check that. Sorry, please do bear with me. American Swinging in Paris. Okay. Now, I looked at the Wikipedia listing for Art Ensemble of Chicago for their albums, and that album isn't listed, so I'm not really sure what the provenance of this is. Anyway, regardless, I'm going to give you those links. So I would describe this as improvised avant-garde jazz, and there are 2 long tracks in here, and I presume from the original vinyl that that's 1 track for each side. There are 4 people involved. There's trumpet, sax, clarinet, flute, upright bass, and lots of percussion, and occasional vocal ejaculations, non-word verbal stuff. And I would, I definitely describe it as free jazz almost entirely. So one thing that I often wonder with stuff that is this free or extreme with its freeness is what the instructions are, or if there were any instructions at all. So what kind of structure are they playing to? And I feel like free jazz was always a kind of an exploration of how little structure can you have in music. And I think there are 2 questions though, which is how little structure can you actually play to? And I think the answer is very, very little indeed if you manage to do that. And then how little structure can you play and for it to be actually listenable to? And that's a very different question, I think. So a lot of this, I feel like, is everybody's doing their own thing, really. They may be responding to an overall feel from the other players. There's my initial impression when I heard it was I thought, the percussionist is having a lot of fun, and then I found out actually that all 4 of them are playing at various points percussion. So they're enjoying the percussion definitely on this album. There are occasional bits that feel more structured, but when I say more structured, this is relatively. This is usually limited to 1 person playing things that you could kind of think of as being a sequence of stuff. Occasionally, 2 of them play the same note at the same time. There's even a tune at times which ties bits together. So as I kind of flick through, I heard this kind of snatch of tune a few times. So there is a unifying thing in some way here. Um, so I'm going to briefly relate an experience that I had a few years ago, which was I was invited to spend a session with a choir called the Noise Choir. And the basic premise of this was there was some vague instructions, but it was about just making noises, vocally or non-vocally, and expressing yourself. And the thing that I found difficult to deal with in this situation is I didn't feel like I was necessarily expressing myself. I felt like I felt quite self-conscious, and I was always asking myself, "Is this good?" Um, and I think this kind of potentially applies to free jazz of this kind as an experience to play and express yourself. That's one thing, and it might be, you might think you are expressing yourself well, and that's your opinion of what you're doing, and that's entirely fine. As a listening experience, that's an entirely different kettle of fish. So this album, amongst there must be quite a few free jazz albums around, is one that onto the onto this list of the 3,000 greatest albums of all time. So some people definitely enjoyed this album, and I have to say, actually, I did enjoy it as well. So I'm going to try and put my finger on why, with something that's this free, did I enjoy it? So mostly it's quite gentle. It's spacious and mysterious. Towards the end of track two, it gets more frantic. So I enjoyed the spacious feel, even though it had this lack of structure. In some ways, possibly even because of the lack of structure. Now, I've realised that over the years, obviously, I've listened to stuff. I do enjoy often bits of music that are like this, that are soundscapey and textural and quite free. But usually I'm used to having them in the context of an album where most of the album is more structured and more musical than this. And then within that context, I find that I can often enjoy this sort of thing. I found that when it's a full album of this stuff, I'm often less taken by it. I was fairly taken by this, and I think it's because of the kind of the aesthetic nature of it. Towards the end, I felt it was too much of a mess and I didn't enjoy it as much. And I think I'm learning with this sort of stuff. I like gentler versions more than the frantic versions. There is, towards the end, an interesting note. It's like just one note, but it's not brief. It's been played for a long time. Now, I wonder what that is. I don't know how it's been created. Out of the instruments that's been listed, my best guess is that it may be clarinet, but it might not be one of the instruments that's listed here. If it is a clarinet or something that's being played, it has probably been played with some kind of circular breathing technique because it's a very, very, very long note. The other instrument that could make this would be a bagpipe, and it does sound quite like a bagpipe, and it would be the kind of the tone of it makes it sound like it's that sort of thing. Anyway, that was just out of interest. So mostly, I found this okay and quite enjoyed it. I understand why the more frantic bit is there towards the end because it gives it a contrast and an art to the album. So I think it works, but I was less keen on it as a kind of aesthetic. So that's what I think about this album. I kind of mostly enjoyed it. And as always, I'd love to invite you to tell me what you think or feel or your opinions of any of this stuff. So please do share by leaving me a comment. And that's it from me for now.